Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a massive financial trade-off that is playing out right now in the global economy. Specifically, we're looking at the engineering and construction services sector and the sheer scale of the financial choices these firms face. They are caught right between the highly lucrative, carbon-heavy projects of the past and the rapidly growing green energy market of the future. I mean, just imagine for a second that your entire investment portfolio or your company's future revenue relies heavily on projects that might literally be regulated out of existence in the next decade. Crazy, right? But on the flip side, imagine the opportunity cost of missing out on a booming green economy. This is the high-stakes balancing act defining the future of the construction industry. How do these massive firms balance their books today while making sure they actually survive tomorrow? Section 1, the construction climate dilemma. Let's just dive right into the core issue facing the sector today. So to understand how the industry formally measures this, we look to the SASB standards, which are now under the stewardship of the International Sustainability Standards Board. Basically, these standards provide the exact accounting metrics that investors and stakeholders use to track climate-related financial risks and opportunities. We aren't just talking about vague corporate sustainability goals here. No, we're talking about hard financial data that dictates a company's cash flow, its access to finance, and its overall cost of capital. The stark reality for the engineering and construction industry is that many of these firms generate a massive chunk of their revenue from clients in highly carbon-intensive industries. Think about things like giant oil refineries or coal-fired power plants. The future capital investments of those clients are seriously threatened by evolving climate regulations. And this regulatory landscape, it's shifting rapidly right beneath these legacy clients. So if a construction firm is too heavily relying on them, well, their own financial future is inherently at risk too. Section 2, tracking the hydrocarbon backlog. Let's see how all of this builds into measurable financial metrics. The absolutely crucial term you need to know here is backlog. I want you to think of a company's backlog as a financial crystal ball. It represents the value of projects that haven't been completed as of the close of the reporting period. In other words, it's revenue that is contractually expected in the future, but just hasn't been recognized yet. If we want to know if a construction firm is built for the future, we have to look really closely at what exactly is inside that backlog. To do this, the SASB standard breaks the climate impact of a company's business mix down into 3 highly specific metric codes. It requires firms to report their backlog for hydrocarbon and renewable projects, the amount of cancellations of those projects, and their backlog for non-energy climate mitigation projects. By forcing companies to categorize their uncompleted work this way, it essentially serves as the ultimate financial lie detector test for investors. Within the broader SASB standard framework, these exact metrics fall under the climate impacts of business mix. This section basically demands that companies quantify their exact financial exposure to different energy sectors. It forces absolute transparency, allowing investors to map out exactly where the future money is coming from. Let's look at the first part of metric IFEN 410B.1. Under this rule, firms have to disclose their backlog specifically in hydrocarbon-related projects, meaning anything directly tied to the fossil fuel value chain. We're talking oil production, gas exploration, refining, coal extraction, and fossil fuel electricity generation. Now, these are the heavy, traditional cornerstones of the industry that have historically generated enormous profits. But as we discussed, they're now heavily regulated and facing intense scrutiny. Section 3, the risk of cancellations. Having a massive, multi-billion-dollar hydrocarbon backlog isn't just a guarantee of future money anymore. If that backlog crystal ball we talked about earlier is filled entirely with oil and gas projects, the company is actually highly exposed. Shifting regulations, new environmental laws, or even just changing public sentiment can suddenly make those projects completely unviable. The downside risks manifest quite literally through project delays, total cancellations, and ultimately diminished long-term revenue growth. That is exactly why metric IFEN 410B exists. It tracks the amount of hydrocarbon backlog cancellations. A project might get canceled for a ton of reasons. Maybe the customer fails to get the necessary permits because of environmental pushback. But take a moment to imagine losing a multi-year billion-dollar construction contract simply because a bank suddenly changed its fossil fuel lending policies and the client couldn't get financing. By tracking this metric, investors see the exact financial hit a firm takes when the carbon economy falters. Section 4, building the green economy. Okay, now we can pivot to the upside of this trade-off because it's definitely not all doom and gloom. The second half of that first metric requires companies to also track their backlog in renewable energy. The standard defines this as energy from sources replenished at a rate greater than or equal to their depletion, so tracking geothermal, wind, solar, hydro, and biomass. It's crucial to understand the sheer scale of this pivot. This isn't just a green PR side hustle for these companies. This is actively building the replacement for their legacy oil and gas revenue. It shows investors how well the firm is capturing the growing market for clean energy generation. Furthermore, the third metric measures something a bit different: non-energy projects aimed at greenhouse gas mitigation. These are projects where the primary motivating factor is climate change mitigation. Think of building new mass transit systems, alternative low-carbon transportation infrastructure, or complex carbon capture facilities. Reporting this backlog shows exactly where engineering firms are building a real competitive advantage in a massively expanding market, completely separate from energy generation itself. Section 5. Weighing the financial future. So, the really crucial point here is how all these distinct project types combine together. When you synthesize a company's total business mix through these specific metrics, investors and analysts can clearly see the multi-billion-dollar trade-offs at play. By comparing these categories side by side, we can instantly understand a firm's posture. Are they stubbornly clinging to the carbon-intensive projects of today, risking massive cancellations? Or are they securing their future revenue by aggressively building out the green economy and climate mitigation infrastructure of tomorrow? The business mix literally tells the whole story. Which leaves us with this final critical thought to ponder. As the engineering and construction industry navigates these incredible financial trade-offs, we really have to ask ourselves, if a company's future revenue is inherently tied to the carbon of the past, are they truly built to survive the regulatory and economic realities of the future? The data absolutely gives us the answer. We just have to be willing to look at the mix. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helps shed some light on the fascinating financial mechanics driving our built environment. Catch you next time.